Hello, welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up NASCAR Cup Series Xfinity 500. Four drivers contending for the championship. One didn't. Must win, got in. Formula One, a new points leader, but it's only by a single point in the chaotic Mexico City Grand Prix. Plus, MotoGP, Supercar Series, and their season finals. And the Grid ranking. Joe San Diego here with me. Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight, Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com. I encourage everyone check out GridNetworkTV.com. Matthew will have his article up and across social media at Grid Network TV. And all this big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show: Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, and Crystal, for investing in the Grid Network, helping us pay the bills, stay on the air, keep the website up and running. And we're very much excited for 2026 as we're working on preparing for the 2026 year. Now, Matthew, we were on the air right before the NASCAR Cup Series race talking about 2025, that season wrapping up, and I mentioned how 2026 could be great if William Byron won Martinsville, got the championship, and go for three in a row at the Daytona 500. Well, now the field is set for Phoenix. He is one of the four drivers. You have Denny Hamlin, who secured his spot by winning at Las Vegas. You have William Byron, who just got Martinsville, the shortest track compared to the biggest track, where Chase Briscoe won at Talladega. And Kyle Larson by 7 points over Christopher Bell. This race, I would say it was something where I was sort of like on the edge of my seat just following the points, but I didn't feel like it got too crazy like past years. We didn't have some of the mayhem which some people sometimes love or don't like at all. In fact, our very own Matt White from Grid Tonight called it tame. Thoughts on how this race and the championship four played out?
Yeah, Joe. I mean, I think we all expected Ryan Blaney to be a threat and William Byron. I don't think we expected him to put belt to butt the way he did, but I expected him to be up front most of the day. But yeah, tame, I think, is the word, like what Matt White said. It was, I can't say boring, but there wasn't really a lot of anything. Obviously, Blaney led 177 laps, and William Byron led like 303 or 304 laps. So it's kind of like the two leaders led combined 400 and pretty much 90-something% of the race were just the guys who finished first and second. So it was kind of like the only thing that was chaotic was whether Hocevar, Bubba, or Daniel Suarez were getting into someone. That's pretty much all that happened. All three of them were involved in 3 cautions apiece. So other than that, yeah, it was just kind of expected. I think the battle between Bell and Larson I thought was going to be more, I guess, tight, but obviously Larson got those more stage points and kind of just opened up that gap more and more to Bell. And then Bell obviously finishing 7th or 8th could not recover, 7th actually. So it's like, yeah, it was kind of tame, Joe, like Matt White said, and it just really not a lot happened. And I guess that's a good thing, though. There was really no opportunities for race manipulation, which completely proves us, at least me, wrong from the show we aired about 7 hours ago, not the meme, but so let's go 8 hours ago when we aired that show. So we thought it was going to be chaotic like that. There was chaos, but at the same time, no race manipulation opportunities. Just most of the race was led by either non-playoff guys or the 2 guys who needed to really win and get in, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, it was something where we did not see the craziness of years past. Of course, some fans, they loved out about Martinsville because you got the beating and the banging. We know this generation of car is not exactly on that level of beating and banging like with prior generations. Still, a lot of folks were talking about how this felt like a little bit like the old school Martinsville. It was hard to get around the lap cars. It was hard to make a pass. When you didn't make a pass, you did have to rely on that bumper a little bit more here and there, including William Byron. That went and move on Ryan Blaney. In the chat room, encourage everyone to share their opinions and comments in the chat room. From Chuck, I did not expect Byron to run this well, but had no real reason to think that. I just didn't see him winning it. I got to be honest with you, Matt. I know we talked a lot about can he do this because of the way the last 2 years he comes here in this race particularly and just seems to be not the William Byron of before. And we talked about, can the results from qualifying carry over? Seems like he really did it, and to be able to push his way towards the front when he lost the lead, when he got off sequence, and get around Ryan Blaney and pull away from Ryan Blaney. I gotta say, that's probably one of his best drives. In fact, they said he's never led more than 300 laps in a particular race. Do you think this was one of his best drives?
Oh, absolutely. I would argue this might be, I can't say his best, but definitely top two, even this season. I would argue his Coke 600 was incredible. He didn't get it done at the end of the race, but I think I'm correct. This is just a stat off the top of my head, which I think is accurate. I can't verify it yet, but I think William Byron's Coke 600, it's like the most points ever scored in a NASCAR event without a win in terms of the new format, because he swept the stages and then finished second. I think he had the fastest lap too, if I'm not mistaken. So other than that, I mean, today, I don't think any of us expected him to score 61 points. Like the fact that he went out there in a must-win situation and swept the stages, led the most laps, obviously over 300, and for him to get the fastest lap too on lap 294 to win the race. I mean, yeah, belt to butt. It was a truly incredible drive. It's a much-needed drive from that 24 team, and he's got a legitimate shot come Phoenix. He's finished third 2 years in a row. Could be a third year in a row, but other than that, not sure. But it was interesting. He had never won a race at, I think some stat on the NASCAR app, I believe, said something like he had never won a race at Martinsville by leading more than like 50-ish or 60 laps. Maybe it was 100. But for him to go out and lead over 300 and win, I mean, my invisible cap right to William Byron. That was an incredible drive, and he deserved it 100%.
He deserved it, and also a shout out to Rudy Fugel. One moment that stood out was when he told William Byron, take care of those back tires. We're going to need them when we catch the traffic. What happened later when Blaney got into the traffic? Here he comes. He got around. Masterful effort by the two of them. Chuck also saying, my driver, Christopher Bell, just did not have the car. It just seems like the last 2 years, he comes in with a point advantage, leaves. Last year, a lot of controversy. This year, he just said the four drivers fighting for the championship are the four best. He just did not have the car. SVG finished 14th. It's a good sign for his fans ahead of many vets. He was in the top 10 for quite a bit today, too. So, I mean, he's getting there. And no doubt he dominated, that referring to William Byron. And this was a really interesting race, how it started out with William Byron to him getting the two stage wins. He had Kyle Larson up there with him, too, putting just the smallest difference of points between being at 1 point behind Christopher Bell at the start of the race to then 6 points, then got up to 10 points. That's what I think you have to do if you're in a situation like them. But a late caution, and this is where I was starting to see how things were going to shake up, saw in stage 2 the two Penske drivers come into pit while Hendrick Motorsports, their drivers, stayed out. That put them off the cycle. So they did claim the second stage, as I mentioned. But at the start of stage 3, we saw Blaney, Hamlin, Logano, Reddick. Larson was even outside the top 10 for a while. You saw William Byron having to try to work his way towards the front. So it wasn't just he stayed up from front all day, had a great car. No, he managed to come out from the back too. Not as far back, but still dealing with all the beating and banging. Then when Bell got off sequence, I thought this was going to be a move that could get him in there because we were running quite a bit. Here comes that second to last caution. He goes there and make a pit stop. He was making some progress, but it just seemed like it was not going to work out. Then, of course, we had that late caution where then everyone came in for 4 tires. So in the last 2 years, Bell has come in and not been able to capitalize, move into the championship 4. We know this year, I remember a couple key instances where Christopher Bell was upset at his, I wouldn't say his crew chief, but at least venting that we have a car that could win a race. I'm getting tired of third place. I'm getting tired of top 5s. you can start looking at all those points, missed points from wins. That's the difference between him pointing in and not pointing in. We know his frustration from the regular season, missing out on so many race wins with Adam Stevens. They've been together for a while. Now, another year where they're both out of the championship four. Do you think Joe Gibbs might be considering some sort of change in the offseason?
I hope not. I think that would be silly, to be honest with you. Just the fact that Christopher Bell truly has been, I would argue, the best Toyota in the Cup Series in the last couple of years. I know Hamlin had an incredible year this year too, and even Reddick's year last year was good. But Christopher Bell has finished third, fourth, and now, unless I tweeted about this for fun, unless Ryan Blaney manages to score 18 stage points and win next week at Phoenix, Bell is guaranteed a fifth place finish in the championship. And if this was a full season, regular season, like 36 races, Bell would still be in mathematical contention. He'd be 25 points off of Mr. William Byron and Kyle Larson. And then obviously Winston, if this was Winston Cup, I mean, that was before my time, but I know they race differently, but like the theoretical fantasy points, it would be his second straight year as the Winston Cup champion, Christopher Bell. So it shows this kid is incredible. This kid is super consistent. It's just, it doesn't happen sometimes. And it's always not really in his favor. Like this year, you look at his playoffs. We were talking in the Slack chat about it. Besides Darlington finishing 29th for Christopher Bell, his worst finish in the last 8 races in these NASCAR playoffs and in general was 8th. Like, there was nothing he did wrong except he didn't finish first. That's really all it was. So for him, he has 4 wins this season. Incredible points here. He's going to finish 5th in the standings. It's just like there was really nothing he could have done except win. If Denny Hamlin doesn't win at Vegas, someone else wins, for example. Or if it's a repeat guy. If Chase Briscoe doesn't win, someone else wins. And then obviously if William Byron doesn't win, Bell's in the championship 4. It just happened to be that 3 guys that William Byron had more points than in this round in terms of scoring points, all won races, which put him to the back. So, yeah, it sucks for Christopher Bell. I think he worked so well with Adam Stevens to the point where it would be silly, honestly, if you mixed it up. I mean, you saw, obviously, there was a mix-up with the Gibbs and Hamlin crews, and obviously that's worked out for Denny Hamlin this year. But I think and then obviously Chase Briscoe, James Small this year, obviously they're going to be fighting for a championship in 7 days from now. But for Bell, Joe, it's just like, I think it'd be silly personally to switch it up. You finish 3rd, 4th, and 5th in the regular season standings, in the full season standings, you finished 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I guess you could say just the standings in general, right? And then 12th the year before that when you were still learning the Joe Gibbs equipment. So it shows that Christopher Bell is an incredible talent. He is going to most likely win a championship before it's all said and done. And he is still young. So I would keep him with Adam Stevens as long as Adam Stevens wants to be employed by Joe Gibbs Racing. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, some great points in the chat room. Chuck says, absolutely on Seatbelt. He just doesn't seem happy with the team for some reason. I think it's just a little bit that frustration knowing that when you started the race, you're already behind Kyle Larson. So like we said in the pre-race show, you're already, I believe it was actually 6 or 7 points behind Kyle Larson. That was the difference. Yes, there was a stage points. Yes, there was points where they were tied at 0 even, but just cannot make it work. And I feel the one key, knowing that there's some uncertainty about the playoff format next year, could it be the exact same? Could there be some changes, some adjustments? I would agree. I think it would be best to just keep the 2 of them together because we don't know what the next format might be. If it is a 3-race championship run with the top 4, or if it's some sort of other different format, because they're really good. This format, consistency is good. I mean, look what Chase Briscoe has done. It's a matter of also getting those key wins at the right moments, because Chase Briscoe, that win at Talladega, that got him in. You look at Denny Hamlin, great season, 6 wins. Still need that win in Las Vegas to get him in. Granted, points-wise, he was looking really pretty. but you just never know with Talladega or Martinsville. So, and he's been on the end where he's been eliminated in Martinsville because of Ross Chastain.
Mm-hmm.
In the chat room, Denver, 2 Joe Gibbs Racing and 2 Hendricks. I hope for Toyota's sake that they sort out their engine problems, because if it happens again in the middle of Phoenix next week, someone needs to answer some questions. I'm glad you brought up this point, Denver. I was thinking about bringing this up next week, but since we're here, Matthew, let's talk about that engine issue. We saw Chase Briscoe first drop out. Seems like something was amiss with the engine. Then we saw Denny Hamlin, same thing, was out. Riley Herbst, I believe, was something a little bit different, but that was 3 Toyotas that went out. At that point, I was starting to wonder, could we see a 4th Toyota go out, like a Ty Gibbs or one of the 2311s, or worst case, Christopher Bell? That did not happen, but overall, when it comes to Toyota, the engine problems, do you think there's any explanation of it? Like whether they're just trying to get more of that horsepower or try and capitalize because next weekend, new engines for them?
I guess it's a good thing that it's a good thing that Hamlin and it's a good thing that Briscoe had previously won, because I believe if the way the points had fell, both of them would have been eliminated from just based on their other performances in this round specifically. But I guess it's a good thing. Maybe JGR wanted to try to test something out with the engine, and if it didn't work, they get a brand new one come championship time. And I think that's best case scenario for them, I guess, too. It's like they were already locked in, right? They weren't really racing for much. Riley, so it's like you're 2 guys that are advancing, and then you have the worst Toyota this season were the 3 that had some sort of mechanical or engine issues. Then obviously Toyota finished in the final 4 spots of this race because Eric Jones had a very, very terrible day. And really not his fault, just a lot of bad luck for the 43 driver. But yeah, so Toyota swept the final 4 positions of this race. But yeah, I guess it's a good thing it happened now. And I hope we can have the same conversation in 6 days from now in the pre-race, or 7 days from now, technically, because it's important to know what information we can find out from this very moment now until the championship 4 race day at Phoenix. So yeah, it's good to happen now. And I think it's an interesting, now it helps, it was good that it didn't happen to Christopher Bell, because I felt like if you're Joe Gibbs, you would have much rather had it happen to anyone else besides Bell in this race. So hopefully that means that they come to the championship 4 race day at Phoenix with new engines, or just, I don't know how it works, but like powerful engines with Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe, that one of those 2 can fight for that title. I think it's going to be interesting now. It's like Denver had mentioned, Joe Gibbs versus Hendrick Motorsports. No Team Penske for the first time in 3 years, at least 3 years. I don't know about, did they make it? I don't think they made it in 2021, but in the next gen era, they've won all 3 titles, obviously.
Yeah. 2021, that's an odd year, so obviously not Logano.
Wasn't it like Hamlin, was Truex and was Chase Elliott in the championship for that year too?
Let's see, the 2021 NASCAR Championship 4, pulling the stat up.
I think it was
Looked like it was Larson, Chase, Hamlin, and Truex.
Well, I got something still left in here, Joe. I still remember that. But yeah, that's interesting. It's another battle of 2 Hendrick versus 2. Actually, I almost said, 2 Hendrick versus 2 Toyota Gibbs Racing specifically. I was going to say if it was Elliott that won today instead of Byron, it would have been the same 4 numbers and almost same 4 drivers 4 years ago. But unfortunately, not. I guess unfortunately for Elliott, obviously that didn't happen. But he was pretty dang close today too.
Yeah, Elliott was pretty close up there too. Just one of those deals I feel with Chase Elliott. He had a fast car. Could he win? Yeah. Could he get around him? Just not really. And of course, we all know Joey Logano. The streak continues. Didn't make the championship 4 this year. Maybe 2026. Chuck also agreed that if Dane loses a motor in the final race, he'll lose his mind. I think Joe Gibbs Racing, I think, as you pointed out, it seems that Hamlin, Chase Briscoe, they may have had something a little different just to experiment, see if it gets a little extra horsepower. May have sacrifices the reliability. I don't think they're going to be having anything experimental next weekend. If they are going to try something next weekend, that's going on Bell's car, that's going on Gibbs' car. Because the last thing they would want is a mechanical issue to take them out of the championship fight.
Because Bell had one the last time Bell made the championship, or his tire went, I think. So that was not so much good luck for that organization in the championship for in the next gen era.
Denver, I can see it happen to Denny in the last 5 laps as he's leading. He'd almost be gutted, try to lose it that way. That would be heart-wrenching way to lose it that way, where you got it in the bag and make something mechanical. I mean, that would just be a brutal way to lose the championship. And we encourage everyone, share your opinions, comments with us in the chat room. Love answering those questions. Meantime, one thing, and I think we'll hear a lot from the chat room because this is a very hot topic for many folks. As I mentioned, my answer, my opinion, keep Adam Stevens with Christopher Bell, because next year we don't know what the playoff picture will look like. What's the format going to be? I couldn't help but notice, I believe it was Dave Burns that was interviewing Christopher Bell, sort of asking him, what do you think of the format? And that was just very interesting. It's like, maybe they are sort of alluding to there's a potential change. If this was the last time we saw this playoff format, and the way Martinsville is the cutoff race, after today's race, which Matt White said he called it tame, we didn't have the craziness, and really Byron, Blaney, they just dominated. So really it was just Bell, Larson, and Bell really wasn't there. Do you feel now is a good time to change the format, refreshing it up? Thumbs up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, too. If you go to backstretchmerch.com, obviously there's a Keep Playoffs Out of Racing, a shirt, a bestseller, too. But, yeah, it's funny, too. I wanted to mention, I actually had it my most viral tweet ever, or post, whatever. And it was just for fact talking about the truck series. And I want to mention, too, I know we'll talk about it, too, next week. If Corey Heim and Connor Zillich do not win the championships, you should immediately set fire to this system. It would be absolutely horrendous, just the way they've gone. And I don't stick in ball sport. We could have a 4-hour-long discussion about the whole conversation with Cliff. But I actually posted, this is actually disgusting, on my Twitter. And I went to bed because I had an almost 2-hour trip to the pumpkin farm with my girlfriend. I had so much fun. But I posted that before bed, closed my eyes, woke up, and my phone was absolutely blowing up. I have 134,000 views and 2.2 thousand likes. That is insane for me. I barely have 400 followers. Nobody likes my stuff on Twitter. I am not all I share is racing stuff. Nobody seems to care. But for the fact that something like that created this much interest on social media, and you had people, I think Denny Hamlin even liked that tweet, which is hilarious. So, and then obviously popular figures. I think it's hinting at something is changing, personally, Joe, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to change it. And whether I think they'll keep the playoffs, whether they go to a 10-race chase format, whether they go to like a 3-4-4 or a 4-3-3 type of thing, or in terms of the rounds, they got to do something. They're lucky this year that William Byron and Kyle Larson, who have been 2 drivers who have scored the most points all year, are fighting for this championship. And then someone like Denny Hamlin, who has 6 wins this year, which is the most, is fighting for this championship. But obviously last year, Logano would have missed the playoffs if it wasn't winning in. So for him to win the title kind of put a stain on that. And I think this year it will absolutely 100% put a huge stain on the sport and how they crown their champions if Corey Heim does not get a big trophy and if Connor Zillich does not get a big trophy. Luckily in the Cup Series, regardless of what they do with the format, I truly believe there's probably only 8 to 10 drivers at most that could actually win the title, regardless of if the playoffs or not. So for them, it's a little different, but in Xfinity, I think, and specifically trucks too, there's really only a few guys sometimes. I think trucks is usually only like 2 or 3 guys at most could probably win the title in a given year, but then in Xfinity, it seems like, besides this year with Zillich, it seems like there's like 5 to 7 guys at least that could win a title. But yeah, for my long run, I hopefully they changed something. They need to, and I think a lot of people know. I expect whoever's holding that trophy on that Sunday within the next couple of days, whether it's going to be an athletic breaking news tweet that they probably already know right now about how the format's going. Something I think is changing. That's why they said when you look at the schedule, where it says playoff, kind of be a little weary. It might not be round of this, round of this. So, yeah, I think they got to change something. I used to be pro playoff, so I think it's actually funny. We could probably find old clips of it. But now, I mean, I'm okay with the playoff, but if it has to be to reward consistency and stuff like that, not one win in 35th and 37th and your next two getting you into the next round. Like Christopher Bell is getting absolutely – I can't say – I was going to say a word, but I think it's a little starts with an S and ends with afted and comes of how he did so well for the last 9 weeks, and he is not going to be fighting for a championship just because other guys won in advance. So, yeah, that's kind of my long thought on the format. Hopefully they fix it. And people are going to love it, people are going to hate it, Joe.
I mean, that's the thing. They have made it to where, I mean, we see online, you got the people that are anti-playoff. They want the full season standings. Then you see some people, they like the idea of a chase or a playoff system. I mean, not going to lie, the cutoff races generally do tend to be a little bit more okay. We're talking about the playoffs more. We're talking about a championship more. NASCAR wanted that. I mean, that's why they created this system. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes it's the way the rules work out, especially when you're in, consistency can sometimes get you there. Chase Briscoe, I mean, during the Talladega race, we were talking, it looked like he could point his way in. Even if he had finished second place, he would have been in a really good spot until his engine blew. But I don't think he would have gotten that engine if he had not won. It's something where I feel if NASCAR makes a change, there's going to be some people unsatisfied. Whether it's the playoff crowd, the 36 race season-long crowd, they're not going to be happy. Overall, if there is a change, I like what you had mentioned. When we get down to 10 races, generally it's not 16 drivers contending for a championship. I mean, nothing against Shane Van Gisbergen or Austin Dillon, but just because you won, especially in the case of Austin Dillon, you shouldn't all of a sudden be, hey, I got a 1 in 16 chance of being the champion, even though the rest of my year was lousy. I mean, could you imagine we had, like last year, Atlanta, that opening round, he won dead, and well, now he's in the round of 8. And there's Talladega. Oh, no, that could have been really interesting. So I would like to see something where, I mean, maybe just make a simple adjustment of, hey, it's not when you're in, but if you win, it's a points gap where it's going to take 2 or 3 bad races before somebody could overtake you without a win. Something like that, I feel, because the gaps are just not there. And if they could simplify it, remove the stage points, remove the playoff points, I think that'll make a lot of people at least say, hey, we got a more simple format to follow. In the chat room, Denver, I'm interested to see what they do with the championship, a 6-driver, 4-race format with all disciplines involved. We've heard about this, potentially a 3 or 4 race championship. Then becomes, well, how many? 3, 4 drivers? I sometimes lean towards just the top 5 drivers, 6 drivers in this case. I don't know about you, Matt, but I think it maybe for me, if there was 5 drivers, 5 races, that's your playoff or something.
Yeah, it's tough. I really can't give you a straight opinion because I really don't know how I feel, and I know Denver's other comment. I think no matter what NASCAR does, people are going to be mad about it. But I think if you have to limit the field to 12 and you still want 10 races, I think it would be cool to kind of do 5-race split, 6 and 6, maybe. I don't know. It's tough because it's like playoffs, I feel like do add excitement, and a lot of the time in the Cup Series, besides when Joey Logano somehow advances, Usually it's the best or at least one of the best 2 or 3 drivers that ends up winning the title. And then obviously Joey Logano just wouldn't have made the playoffs last year without the winning in, like you were mentioned. So I don't know what they're going to do. I think a lot of the reporters and the insiders who have sources, they know, and they're just waiting for that inevitable announcement that's going to come in probably 10 days from now. But yeah, I don't. It's tough because there's no right answer. I feel like the 36 races would be cool too with no playoffs. Because playoffs sometimes I think Supercars playoffs, those fans out there, if you're watching this race, are going to understand that you might like it at first, the playoffs, but then it clearly wears off if someone like Brock Feeney or Will Brown does not win this title this year. I think pit fans are going to be a little peed off. So, yeah.
Already, Chaz Monster from 6th to 2nd because of his sweep. So, and he is well within a race win of catching Brock Feeney. So, yeah, the playoffs, I get it, the idea, especially, something to make it where it's more of an exciting finish. Same time, I do sort of miss when you do have the excitement of, okay, let's take IndyCar. Last few years, Palou has just dominated to where the championships decided early, at Portland, in fact. But when you have a year where it comes down to the last race, it just builds that extra amount of excitement where here I feel like it just almost feels staged. I mean, literally, it's top 4 drivers are going to be in no matter what. If there was a way where it's like, hey, we have something where, there's some sort of elimination format. If that's what people like, okay. You could just have a better focus on the drivers that mathematically are eliminated. I've noticed F1's doing that. If you notice that, they've been showing like, we're down to 5 drivers left in the championship. They're going to say 4 drivers now that George Russell's out of the picture soon. So I'm curious if they're seeing like, hey, they don't want to play off either. And of course, see how it goes.
Imagine that. IndyCar, too. They better not go near the playoffs. I don't care how much Fox owns in that ownership group. IndyCar does not need a playoff. Just because you have a unicorn in Alex Palou that is kicking everyone's butt doesn't mean you need to start changing the system. He's not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in basketball in the 60s or 70s when they weren't letting you dunk. I think that was sometime. I'm not really as informed as I used to be about basketball and stuff. But, you don't want to start changing the rules because some guys are dominating. But
exactly. Yeah, just because some guys are dominating, don't change the rules for that. I will say, especially after today's race, in the last couple of years where it was the absolute chaos or just a cutoff race that didn't deliver because the points gap, some sort of refresh I think would be welcome. But as Denver and we've said, it's not going to please everyone. One group not pleased at all right now, the Ford Motor Company. No Fords in the championship 4. Blaney, 2nd place. We knew he was in a must-win situation. Logano was running well, but not exactly a factor, and he's just said it. We just did not have that speed. So the Penske streak will end. I mean, you look at, since it was 2022, there's been at least one Penske driver in the championship 4. Of course, last year you had both Logano and Blaney. A gap year in 2021, but then Brad Keselowski in 2020 made that championship 4. Overall, the streak for Logano continues. So no championship 4, maybe next year. Blaney, he said he was loose. In fact, he didn't even suggest any fault to William Byron for how he raced him. And we even saw Blaney go to victory lane congratulate William Byron. What are your thoughts on Blaney, Logano, and the Penske group, which not only here in NASCAR will they enter the last race without a shot at the championship, same in IndyCar as well for them.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, I guess. I know when looking through the quotes, obviously writing my story for this race, they asked Ryan Blaney how he felt that Penske didn't have a car in the championship 4, and he just said it stinks. It stinks, and they feel bad for Roger, obviously does a lot, and for them not to make the championship 4, it sucks. But at the same time, it's like, I think Blaney really was going to be a threat. I really do. And I said it on air too. And even I know Tanner had mentioned, all of us were so confident in Ryan Blaney because if he made it to Phoenix, I think he would be the favorite for the championship. Just the way he is as a driver, and obviously Penske just seems to understand Phoenix, at least the fall Phoenix race. So, yeah, it's I don't really know what much more to add. Obviously, in IndyCar, Penske kind of fell off this season a little bit, but in NASCAR, they're still going to have probably the sixth finishing driver in the standings, and I think Logano is eighth right now. People don't realize that when after you get eliminated, you fall and you can finish anywhere from 5th to 16th. So someone like Tyler Reddick, for example, who had gotten eliminated, didn't make the round of 8, is actually 7th in the point standings right now because of how consistent Tyler Reddick has randomly been these last couple of races. So he actually passed Chase Elliott and Joey Logano on points. So that's just an interesting thing. So they're going to fall somewhere in that range. The Penske guys, probably worst, they'll finish as 10th, and then the best they'll finish as 6th because Christopher Bell has a 99.99% chance of finishing 5th. So to finish 6th and 9th, I guess, if you're 6th and 8th, give or take, for the Penske guys in NASCAR, not a bad thing, but when you have won the last 3 championships and had at least 1 or 2 guys finish inside the top 2 in the standings, it's a down year for them, technically. And I know Logano won a race, Blaney won at least 2 or 3 races this season. It's tough. Blaney would have been the biggest threat, and I honestly think if you're someone like Denny Hamlin or Chase Briscoe or even Kyle Larson, you got to breathe a little sigh of relief knowing that Ryan Blaney is not competing for a championship. But he sure as hell can go out there and win that Phoenix race. I wouldn't doubt that in one mind. It's happened before where the non-championship driver wins the championship race. Obviously, Ross Chastain did it a few years ago. I think it was at least a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I don't even remember. Was it? It wasn't last year. No, it was. No, was it last year? I don't know. Honestly, it's been a tough couple of years. But yeah, my point still stands regardless. Blaney still can be a threat, and I think they're a little thankful that he did not make the championship for him.
In the chat room, Chuck. Yep, on the Blaney point, I have been watching 40 plus years, and I do not want to go back to a standard format in regards to a standard format season long versus playoff. In his post-race interview, Blaney said he would have done exactly what Byron did. I recall saying that. And a very interesting point, lost all respect for Penske after the multiple cheating scandals in IndyCar. In fact, I stopped watching it. This year, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's a fair point. Obviously, we saw a lot of stuff going on with the supposed one of the best teams in IndyCar and had all those issues, obviously, at the Indy 500 and Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin cars, Will Power, obviously. So it's like, I think Chuck makes an excellent point. I can completely understand why he would be mad and lose the respect because technically when you have stuff like that, you're a little cheating. And I guess I know they used to say if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. But it's a little more police nowadays, and they got multiple times doing it. So, I think some great points there.
And it makes me think of, we remember when the scandal came out, the very next race, the Coca-Cola 600, it seemed like Penske was not a no-show. And the thought was, well, after what happened with the Indy 500 cheating scandal, maybe they're playing extra conservative. We got to remember, they didn't get their first win, Team Penske, until the 10th race of the year, and that was at Talladega, Austin Cindric. The very next race weekend is when we saw Joey Logano win at Fort Worth, Texas. That was back in May, his only win. The only other wins, Nashville, Blaney, you have Daytona, Blaney, and Loudon. So really, 2 wins, Daytona, Talladega, super speedways. The others, Nashville, Texas, Loudon. This was not a great year, and I'm just wondering if maybe some of the distraction of the shakeup with the IndyCar organization, Tim Cindric gone, the negative press attention, and then you're going out there. I wonder if that played a little bit of a role, because to only have 2 of your drivers get 1 win each, I'll be shocked if Cindric and Logano could win next weekend. Blaney could, Heck, maybe even Logano if they have that set up for last year just to show to everyone, hey, we're still going to just come out here, win, and spoil the party.
Yeah,
Just not the Penske year.
yeah, it's funny how good you have to be as an organization to win 5 races and still not have a great year. So that shows how incredible Team Penske really is as an organization and all of motorsport, like you had mentioned. So yeah, not a great year for them to really have only 5 wins. I know it sounds crazy because other teams would die to have at least 1 or 2 wins, but yeah, you made good points.
I mean, Trackhouse, Shane Van Gisbergen got more wins.
Oh yeah, it's the same amount of wins as Penske. That is crazy to think about. And he'll finish ahead of Cindric in the points, I believe.
Yeah.
I have to confirm that before I say silly things. Yes,
Yeah.
Shane Van Gisbergen will finish ahead of Austin Cindric in the standings this year.
Yeah, I mean, you got Chastain, SVG ahead of Cindric. They're a little bit behind Joey Logano. I don't think they'll get him, but still, when Trackhouse point-wise is doing good, and one driver from Trackhouse has more wins than your organization, I mean, Penske perfect. They were far from perfect this year. Denver. So if you predict the future next weekend will be an overtime championship win or a comeback of the ages to win the championship? That's a great question. I think if there was going to be an overtime championship win or a comeback of the ages to win the championship, I think for the comeback, it has to be if Denny Hamlin has a lousy qualifying effort and finally claims his championship. If we go to overtime, just the way Phoenix is, I feel like whoever gets that better restart leads the field is going to have that advantage. You, Matt?
Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you what the heck is going to happen. It could be a boring race. It could be a long green flag run to end it. I just know for a fact I truly, truly believe that Kyle Larson, William Byron, Denny Hamlin, and Chase Briscoe will be running inside the top 8 for 98% of that event. Unless they have – usually every year there's one issue. Like obviously a couple of years ago, Christopher Bell had a tire issue. And then if you go even farther back, a late restart wrecked a contender or 2 contenders or something like that. So I hope for the sake of it that there's not some chaotic thing where the leaders get wrecked out, where the playoff guys get wrecked out over some silly thing. But it's going to be interesting, and hopefully it's the last time we have a one-race championship race. I'm actually more concerned that Corey Hyman and Connor Zillich aren't going to win the championship because of silly tomfoolery or whatever the word would be. But
yeah, wouldn't that be something else? Corey Hyman finishes 5th or something, a non-playoff driver wins, and Honeycutt finishes 2nd and takes the championship. I mean, I know some viewers support a playoff. I just feel, especially in those development series where the drivers are trying to get that attention to move up, that one I feel like that should be more a season-long point stand. But that's just me. Cup Series, you could do whatever you want. That's the pinnacle of American stock car racing. But the Truck Series, I think it should be, hey, you just won 11 races. Shouldn't come down to one race if you're that dominant. Now, I mentioned before, the championship, or actually you mentioned before, this is very similar to 2021 where you had Kyle Larson, the number 5. You had Denny Hamlin, the number 11. You had Martin Truex in the 19. Well, now you got instead Chase Briscoe in the 19. The one difference is it's not Chase Elliott in the number 9. It is William Byron in the 24. So 2 Joe Gibbs Toyotas, 2 Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolets. You got William Byron in his 3rd consecutive championship 4. Kyle Larson in his 3rd, and it's interesting. He has an interesting pattern. We talked about Joey Logano, his even streak. Listen to Kyle Larson, 2021, missed 22. Here he is, 23, missed 24. Here he is, 25. So I'm guessing next year is going to be Logano. The year after is going to be Larson. And you have Denny Hamlin, who hasn't been in since 2021 that year. How does this Final Four stack up to past year's championship fours?
I mean, I truly believe this is one of the best. And I mean that because all the drivers have at least 2 or 3 wins, if I'm not mistaken. all of the drivers would have been in the top 6, I believe, in the if there was a full season standing. So for me, it's like I don't see why this is one of the more fair ones, I would argue, because no offense to Logano, I know he deserves every right with his championships, but to be seated 17th in points and win the championship shows that he performed when it mattered the most, obviously. I know we hear that a lot, but this year just seems that, and I mean, I'd argue 2023 too, when you had Larson, when you had Bell, when you had Byron and Blaney. I think that year too, all 4 of them were the best drivers pretty much all year round. And then you can even go farther back. The 2021 year, same thing. I'm choking on my own spit, but with the guys who made the championship for then too. So, yeah, I think that's a fun final round. And I think if you had to pick 4 guys to make it, those probably you had a good chance of picking those 4 that made it this year. I think Briscoe is probably the odd one out in terms of I think a lot of people would have thought Bell was going to get in over Briscoe. I know here at Grid Network, not one of us had picked Briscoe to make the championship 4. I actually picked him to be out in the round of 12. So my bad, Briscoe. Didn't think you were going to do this, but shout out for you to do it. So, yeah, and then I think even on the Hendrick side kind of makes sense whether it was going to be Larson or Byron. I think all of us had Blaney, or at least in the championship 4, because it's Ryan Blaney. But, yeah, this is definitely one of the better championship 4s, in my opinion, in terms of their overall performance throughout the year. So they would all be 3 of them. Well, 2 of the guys, Larson and Byron, would be fighting for a championship if there was no playoffs. But guys like Blaney would have just missed out. Bell would be in contention, but obviously he's not in. And then you look back in the standings, and then you have guys like Hamlin and Briscoe there too. So, yeah, at least one of the more fair ones. I would say it's definitely more fair than what occurred last season.
I would agree in the sense that you have Denny Hamlin, all his wins, very great season. William Byron, okay, he got the wins when he needed to, but that's what you do to get yourself with this format in there, and he was consistent all season long. Kyle Larson, a little bit of an interesting year. I feel like he's almost a 4th place driver, because the 3rd place driver I would put Chase Briscoe, just the consistency all year long. Not flashy, but it just seemed like after Pocono, that win, all of a sudden we're seeing a lot more of him. He gets the win at Darlington, then he gets the win at Talladega. I think he might be, for many, sort of the underdog favorite. But really, if I had to stack them, I would say Hamlin, Byron, Briscoe, Larson. But qualifying, that's going to be the tail of the tape where we see who ranks up, gets that first pit stall. We saw coming clutch for William Byron this race weekend at Martinsville. Before we switch over to Formula One, Chuck says, I agree on one race finale and would like to see a final round as a best of 4 races. 3 wins, 14 top 5s for Larson. Solid. I mean, overall solid, no doubt. And the top 4 are all very close in stats. I mean, I believe all of them, even Byron, he's just outside the top 5 of the NASCAR grid rating. So if he gets that win next weekend, he could be in there. So again, you have essentially all 4 of them. It's been a while. Logano was not in the grid ranking at all last year, and he claimed that championship.
Yeah, all championship 4 guys all have 3 wins apiece and over 11 top 5s apiece. So that's pretty good in my opinion.
Indeed, a solid year of race and championship battle. Now, before we bring Kobe in to jump into F1, we'll let you go, Matt. But what is your one shining moment?
Oh, that's tough, honestly. I guess you would say William Byron. I want you guys to really touch on MotoGP and F1 and Supercars, because there's a lot of stuff that happened there too. But I think in terms of my one shining moment, just William Byron in a almost must-win situation, went out there and got the absolute maximum amount of points he could have scored in that event. And he did it when he needed to. So, yeah, shout out to William Byron and that number 24 team. they did what they had to do, and now they're going to be fighting for a championship. I don't know if he finished as third for the third year in a row, but he has just, I know you can't argue the 25, each of them have a 25% chance. They kind of do and they don't. So we'll see what happens. But yes, William Byron would be my one shining moment. I'd also argue, I know you'll touch on Lando Norris, absolute belt to butt in that event too. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. And then I'll be finishing up my GridNetworkTV.com story on the Xfinity 500 and William Byron dominating it.
Indeed. Thank you so much for your time, Matt. As Chuck said, I'm excited. Great coverage all year, gents. Keep it up. Thank you, Chuck. Do this because we enjoy sharing our passion of motorsports with all the viewers out there. Kobe, Mexico City. We had the Mexico City Grand Prix, and one of the big things, an interesting grid to start off this race. You had Lando Norris on the front row, on the pole. He then had alongside him Charles Leclerc. Then third, the surprise for many, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, Max Verstappen were your top five. Oscar Piastri starting eighth. Here we go. First lap, first corner. Of course, a very long drag race to get to that first corner where in the past we've seen a lot of mayhem. Well, this year left the same thing. Plenty of mayhem entering that first corner. A wild start, a wild 8 laps of racing. The rest of the race, though, we saw Lando Norris just drive away. He took another win, leading all the laps. And one of the big things, he got now the points lead. Charles Leclerc second, Max Verstappen third. They claimed the podium spots. There was a late virtual safety car. It was interesting. Carlos Sainz went off, managed to drive off the track behind a barrier, but that virtual safety car period just made it hard for Max Verstappen in the closing laps to get around. And taking fourth place, Ollie Berman. We'll talk more about him. But Kobe, when it comes to Lando Norris, now leading this championship by 1 point over his teammate, Oscar Piastri, could this rattle Oscar Piastri's confidence and build up confidence for Lando Norris to go claim that championship?
Yeah, Joe, I'm a full believer in professional sports and momentum. And right now, it seems like all the momentum is on Lando Norris' side. I have a feeling that Oscar Piastri might have peaked way too soon because, as we've seen, from the start of the year, he's been, one of the obviously the top drivers to beat in Formula One. But in these last few races, it just seems like, something's been off. With Oscar Piastri and the McLaren's, like the car is not to his liking anymore. And then you had the papaya rules and then the in-team battle, also affecting things as well. And it just seemed like, that Lando Norris, while we were questioning his ability to be the lead driver at during the first half of the season, we said Oscar Piastri was that guy and that he was as cool as a cucumber. And I'm honestly shocked that we're at this point now, Joe, because I didn't think we'd see Oscar Piastri be in this position. I thought he was just going to cruise his way to this championship and he would solidify himself as the number one driver at McLaren. But I think, it's up to discussion now because Lando Norris, he's been doing everything he's needed to do. And if you just keep the momentum rolling these last few race weekends, I think that Lando could potentially pull this out and become this year's Formula One world champion, while Oscar Piastri will be wondering, well, how in the world did this get away? Because it seemed like for the longest time that he was going to be the guy to beat, and now he's going to be the one chasing his teammate Lando Norris, and who knows what will happen with McLaren, the team in general, these last few races, because it seems like they're seemingly trying to hand this drivers' championship over to Max Verstappen, and Max is still in play. All it takes, is both McLaren drivers did not have a good race next time out. Max Verstappen win, get the max points, and then he's within a race of taking this championship lead. And I know it's not going to be the exciting, battle we saw back in 2021 when Verstappen and Hamilton were tied going into Abu Dhabi, but it's setting up to be an extremely exciting championship battle down the stretch. One that nobody saw coming this year.
Yeah, this year, especially the way that first half of the season went, I would not anticipate we'll be talking about Max Verstappen this late. And as you mentioned, within a race, 36 points. If McLaren has a double DNF and Max goes out there, 25 points. That gap is down to 11 points, and it was really, you got to finish ahead. So a lot of potential for Max Verstappen to go out there, still get it. So I think this is a huge moment for Lando Norris to go out there, get the win, and show I still have what it takes to claim a big win, dominate the race, and show the championship, whether it's my teammate or me, you're going to have to deal with us. I think this could be good for McLaren. But Oscar Piastri, from all the comparisons of, oh, he's like Kimi Räikkönen, the ice cold man, to where he is now, I will say this at least, that drive from him, he fell from 8th down to 9th, I believe even as low as 10th, and just worked his way towards the front, tried to get as much points as possible. Could have been a lot worse situation. So just to be a single point behind, I think overall that has to be a great effort for him that has to be recognized, and hopefully shows to himself that he could still get this championship done. It's not over. Early in the race, though, Kobe, I feel like when we saw Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton, I thought it was going to be over shortly for the two of them. They were not giving each other space. Max would cut a corner. Then we saw Lewis cut a corner. Lewis was handed a penalty, while Verstappen was not handed a penalty. I thought at some point they were going to collide and be over the race for them. Some people felt Max was too aggressive with his four-wide move and just the racing, how he was. Do you believe Max Verstappen's moves early on was over the line, too aggressive? Or was it necessary considering the way this race played out that, okay, you had to make those moves early on?
I know Max has been largely downplaying his role in this year's championship. I remember just a handful of races ago, he was like, we're not even really thinking about it, that we're just gonna see where things go, as the races go on. But I think Max Verstappen, he's saying that a title shot is within hoping. And usually, in tradition with Formula One, most of the time the driver who goes into turn one gets the lead out front and clear. That's usually the one who ends up winning the race more times than not. So I think Max saw, that he had to try to make up as much ground as he can to at least try to maybe make a stunning pass for the lead on the outside four wide, or at least get himself in a position where he could keep up with whoever, ended up ahead, which was Lando Norris. So I think that was a very desperate move by Max, and that's something he felt like he needed to do in that moment because, track position in Formula One is extremely important, and he wanted to have that position to have a shot to go out there and get the win. But, as we saw, Mexico City hasn't, really been one of the best tracks for Red Bull, with the high altitude there in Mexico City. So the Red Bull was not as strong as we've seen in the last few races. But, it's still plenty of strong for Max to pick up some key points and still inch a little bit closer to the championship lead. I'm sure he'd rather be a lot closer than he is right now, but he's slowly getting there. But, if he needs to get out there and finish ahead of the McLarens for these final races to have a real shot of getting there. But it will also be easier to have the McLarens have an off day, kind of like we saw today by Oscar Piastri standards, that, he didn't perform well in qualifying. Then at the start, lost a couple of spots and he had to work his way up, and still kudos to him for the recovery drive he put on. If he didn't pick off a few more positions there at the end, he would be a little further back than Lando Norris, besides being one point behind there. But to get back to what you're talking about, Joe, with Max Verstappen being, too aggressive, I feel like that was something that he felt like he needed to do. And, really interesting there that, they called the time penalty on Lewis Hamilton. I believe it was for 10 seconds, if I remember correctly. And then Max Verstappen, they investigated him as well, but no action taken. After the race, Lewis was asked about it, and he basically said double standards. Like Lewis gets penalized, Max doesn't, and, that's going to be an ongoing discussion that people are going to be talking about, for probably the next several days or so until the next controversy comes about. And also one thing I wanted to point out, Joe, that there's not was in the script. We saw a scary moment earlier in the race. I mean, we didn't. Oh, yeah. I didn't see it live, but I saw it later on. With Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson was driving through the track, and marshals were cleaning up debris. Thank goodness Liam Lawson had his head on a swivel, because if he wasn't, we could have seen a tragedy there. We always want, tip our hats to the marshals and thank them for what they did, because they're volunteers, because they're out there because they love motorsports just as much as we do. And we really appreciate everything they do. Yeah, and at the same time, want to make sure we show gratitude to those folks and protect them the best way that we're doing. So I hope Formula One, will investigate this situation, because something like this does not need to be happening. We don't need marshals on a live track almost getting struck by an F1 car. That was an extremely scary situation, and I'm glad that Liam Lawson, was really paying attention, because if he wasn't, I might be talking about a tragedy tonight, Joe, from the drummer Manos Rodriguez. And as Liam said on the radio, he said, "I could have killed them."
Yeah, that was a scary situation to come around the corner, and there's two marshals, in fact, trying to run off the track. I know I saw on Blue Sky, Chris Medlins has said there's some sort of investigation going on, but yeah, as much as the marshals, we are super supportive of what they do to allow the racing to occur safely and allow us to enjoy motorsports. Somewhere there was some sort of serious miscommunication to have that occur, and unfortunately, there's been a case of a marshal in Formula One back in the 70s being struck, and there have been fatalities. So hopefully, whatever comes out of this investigation by F1 to FIA to prevent this from occurring, some sort of additional steps to really ensure the safety of the marshals as well as the competitors. Max Verstappen, I know he was the big talk of, every week lately, closing the gap more and more, but Lando Norris, I felt really stole the show today, but one driver that I felt really stood out, and it impressed me. Oliver Berman was running in third place on pace. At one point, he was pulling away from Max Verstappen when he had the soft tires. Max Verstappen was one of the few drivers that started on the medium tires. He went from, I believe he started in I don't exactly remember what spot. Maybe it was ninth or somewhere. But he took advantage of all the mayhem up front, because Wade Charles were front, and then when Lewis Hamilton, and we saw Max Verstappen get into it on lap 8 as Hamilton cut the corner. Verstappen and George Russell went wide. There goes Oliver Berman. And I thought they're just going to get around him at some point, but this is great. He was really in third place for quite some time. Of course, Max doing what Max does the best, making those medium tires last a long time. Super stint. Then switches to the soft tire, gets around to take that podium. But to look at a potential Haas podium, still Berman was over the moon happy with this race. Last year, we know he made his super sub appearance for Carlos Sainz and Ferrari. This year, he joined Haas, which works well with Ferrari. Haas so close to that podium, and Berman just getting this done. Should Oliver Berman be a driver on the list for many teams to look as a potential hire?
Yes, Joe. I think Oliver Berman proven that at some point, that a bigger team needs to come call. It was a remarkable result today for him to, come so close to getting that podium finish. Yeah, it would have been a massive party in the Haas garage if they got a podium today in Mexico City. And for Berman to be able to push that car to the limit and get as much as he could out of it, that was something that he should be extremely proud of, and the team as well, for all the hard work they put in this year. And you mentioned, his super sub that he did, with Ferrari, and Oliver Berman, he was a part of that Ferrari junior driver program, the Ferrari Academy driver. And, so Ferrari think very highly of Oliver Berman. And this is, the reason why he got put in this Haas F1 seat, because Ferrari wanted to see one of their development drivers get an opportunity to race in Formula One. And Ferrari's 8th, and Berman, has really paid off, especially after you see a result like this today. And I know in the next few years or so, we're going to see the Formula One silly season driver market, start to make a lot more noise than it did this year. And I think Oliver Berman's name could potentially be out there, especially, you're looking at the current crop of drivers at Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton, in his 40s, we don't know how much longer he's going to continue racing in Formula One. So I think, maybe just a few more years left before Lewis decides to call it quits. And if you need another driver to go race for Ferrari, maybe Oliver Berman could potentially position himself to, replace Hamilton at Ferrari in the next few years or so. And Charles Leclerc, I know, has been with Ferrari he's been a Ferrari affiliated driver first, and then he became a Ferrari driver. Yeah, so that's a team, in driver combination, which will be a shock to see them split up, because it seems like, that Charles is like Ferrari driver through and through. So, but I know there's obviously been rumors out there that in the future maybe Charles could, decide to move on to another organization. So I think if either of the Ferrari drivers decide to bow out, Oliver Behrman could potentially, take one of those spots.
Behrman, I think he has a lot of potential. Ferrari will be interesting. I mean, we know Charles Leclerc has been a Ferrari driver for pretty much, as you said, entire F1 stint. Of course, started off with the development, Sauber, when it was Alfa Romeo. Now Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton just joined Ferrari. Doesn't have that many years left. I think he just really made his case, and you just never know if another team might try to scoop him up. It's going to be very interesting, as you said, silly season coming around the corner for F1. Before you know it, we're going to be talking about who's going where, the changes, and so on. Behrman has to be one to watch. But at the same time, I would say if I was Behrman too, be careful. I wouldn't go with a team such as Alpine right now. That would not be exactly a smart move, in my opinion, just the way Alpine is currently. Of course, F1, they're off next race weekend, so they're going to be coming back before you know it. MotoGP, though, let's start with the MotoGP, the Malaysian Grand Prix, and unfortunately, some scary situations that occurred in one of their support series races.
Yeah, we have to start off our MotoGP section by talking about some very serious news because, in the Moto3 race, we saw two Moto3 riders involved in a really scary accident, and those two riders were Jose Antonio Ruda and Noah Detweiler. Both of those Moto3 riders were airlifted by helicopter to a hospital near the Sepang circuit in Malaysia after a brutal accident during a sighting lap ahead of the Malaysian Grand Prix. Noah Detweiler, it was reported that he was going to undergo multiple surgeries, and there's been no official communication on his condition, since his team put out that statement. So, Joe, for any viewers out there who are unfamiliar with MotoGP, can you explain to them what is a sighting lap and what was the reaction to this crash?
Yeah, so a sighting lap is what a lot of folks will see in F1. That's when the riders, in this case in MotoGP, are on their bikes and they're coming out of the pit lane, and they work their way to the grid. They have the option of going straight to the grid, and then they're on the grid until it's time for the formation lap and then green light. Or they could go into pit road, maybe make some more minor adjustments, talk to the team a little bit, and then come back, do another sighting lap. So this is what was the first opportunity for everyone to go on track. And just really unfortunate that it just seemed like a mechanical issue caused this, because coming out the corner, you got these long straightaways, just blindsided, just was not aware of the slow bike ahead. And when you just have two bikes collide like that, it is just vicious. I mean, this isn't an accident where the riders could go slide in, dissipate some of that energy. This is like just essentially almost a near head-on collision when one rider is going so slow and the other one's going much faster. Overall, the reaction was, I think everyone knows the severity of this accident. It delayed the entire day of racing for MotoGP. I know Pecco Bagnaia was critical, saying he didn't think Moto3 should have raced after this accident. This is something where this occurred at Malaysia, where there has been fatalities here in MotoGP. We know the dangers of motorcycle racing. You do not have a roll kit. You do not have safety belts. It's just one of those deals where, unfortunately, this was a mistake made by two riders trying to get up to MotoGP. This is Moto3. So for those not familiar, you got Moto3, then Moto2, and then MotoGP. That's almost the equivalent of the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and Moto3 being the Truck Series. We're hoping a speedy recovery for both riders. It's just truly scary situation, and just really, I think, put a damper on the entire rest of the race weekend.
Yeah, definitely put a major damper on the race weekend. We're definitely going to continue sending our well wishes to those two Moto3 riders, Jose Antonio Ruda and Noah Detweiler. Yeah, I remember when you sent us on our private chat, Joe, that video of this. I saw this and my jaw dropped. Like, it was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, it was like he was at 0 miles per hour and then he was hit at full speed. Like, that was completely, just a horrendous accident. And And then you see one rider going sliding across the track this way, and then you see the other one, which I believe that was Detweiler, right? The one that got hit from behind. As he was the one that went sliding out of sight, thankfully, because given how serious it was, especially for him. So it was. I'm glad they were able to. The medics on site were able to get to those two riders and get them airlifted to the hospital and get the care that they need. And hopefully we'll get a positive update with it in the next few hours or, in days ahead that these guys are going to be okay. But yeah, it was an extremely scary thing. And I think Pecco Bagnaia has a good point, about saying like, why are we continuing to race, after something like this? Because, I think we've seen, like in the past, in certain cases, we see a scary accident happen and the race is suspended. And then we're no longer going to continue. And then, I remember in the IndyCar series, I think, twice. I remember when Robert Wickens had his scary crash at Pocono. You remember they repaired the fence at Pocono and then they continued racing. And you remember they did a horrific job repairing that catch fence. And Sebastian Bourdais, he was about to protest and say, I'm not going to continue racing, because he said, do you see that fence? Like, it was I hate to say it this way, but it was a crappy job. Like, it was if another car got airborne there, I don't think it would. I think they probably would have gone flying out of the ballpark or how awful that fence repair was. And then also, correct me if I'm wrong, the unfortunate, fatal accident of Justin Wilson after he got, struck in the head. They got him, to the hospital, and then they continued and finished that race, I believe it or not, Joe. So I guess it's not uncommon to have scary accidents like that occur, and then we keep on racing because it's just like it seems situational, because sometimes you'll have a scary accident and then they decide that, hey, we're going to suspend things and not continue. And then other cases, like the two examples I just mentioned, it's like, yes, that's a really scary accident, we're going to get them taken care of, but we're going to finish the show.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel we have really changed to where back in the day was just, this is part of the risk of motorsports, fatal accidents, and we just keep racing. I mean, it's just one of those deals where the safety measures have come in. Thankfully, has made it where fatal accidents are much less. And as you said, it's much more situational. In the case of Justin Wilson, they finished the race. And then that was after what happened in 2011 with Dan Weldon, where when that wreck crashed, everybody knew we're not racing over. This is just too dangerous. And of course, the Pocono repair job after the Wickens accident, that was a shock. So it's one of those deals. I think this might be something for MotoGP to discuss, like, hey, we should revisit this. Granted, it's probably situational, as you said, so maybe we won't be aware or update about changes, but at least within our organization, for the sake of the riders and the teams, say, hey, here's what we're thinking of going forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure there's no perfect way to do these type of things, Joe. Like, do you continue racing or do you not? But like with MotoGP slate for the race day, and also with Formula One as well. If you have both F3 and F2 racing, like you have Moto3, then you had Moto2, and then you had the MotoGP race. So given the situation, it was interesting to see how it played out, wondering how the schedule was going to change, because, you needed to get all of your different races and all of that. So, yeah, this is certainly going to be a story we'll be paying attention to. And if we have an update on the conditions of Jose Antonio Ruda and Detweiler by Wednesday's Grit Tonight show, we'll provide a full update on Wednesday night. And now a quick update on the MotoGP race itself. Pecco Bagnaia won the sprint race and was on pace for a strong finish until a flat tire took him out of the Malaysian Grand Prix. Alex Marquez went on to claim another win with Pedro Acosta in second, and Juan Mir in the Honda claiming third place. And that was another case of me picking the two correct riders, but the wrong races, because I picked I think I picked Alex Marquez to win the sprint and Pecco Bagnaia to win the Grand Prix. I hate I did that, because if I flip-flopped, I would have gotten two pick-a-winner points instead of none. But to put a bow on this MotoGP race, the season only got two races remain, with Portugal and Valencia to close out the year. And now switching gears to the Repco Supercars Championship, the inaugural finals is underway. Supercars' version of the playoffs. We had drama all weekend with the 10 finals drivers being reduced to 7 after the Gold Coast round. Things kicked off early with Brody Kostecki taking damage in qualifying. The crew put some tape on the left front that he had damaged, but in the chicane, the fixed job failed, and he went straight into the wall head on, with little speed scrubbed off. 4 photographers were taken to the hospital, and that area was no longer accessible for photography. Joe, we've been able to we've been very fortunate to have access to photographer points for our coverage, at Portland International Raceway. In the series, we've covered there, from Formula E to NASCAR and the IndyCar series. They've been very kind to give Grid Network closer access to the track. So for viewers who are looking into motorsports photography or want to know more about it, do you have any message to share after such a frightening accident?
This is just an unfortunate reminder, very similar to the first story of MotoGP, of the risk in motorsports. Now, one thing, these access points, there are a great opportunity to get those great photos. I know online, one photographer is sharing his pictures of Brody Kosecki coming closer and closer and closer. He's sustained some injuries, but he was fortunately able to recover, be back at the track the next day. When you get the opportunity to do this kind of work where you're going out there taking the photographs, it is very important to just listen to the race director, the promoters, when they gave their safety briefings. I know we've done Formula E, IndyCar, NASCAR. There's always a photographer meeting of these are the approved points where you could go get photos. Here are some of the basic rules. One of the things I think that really made a difference, one of the big key rules is never lean against the wall. It's very easy when you're standing there, especially after you're waiting a while for the cars to come around, to just lean up against that wall, get their camera out, and get those photos. I mean, one photographer said it after the accident. He saw the car was coming. He was able to turn around and at least duck and not face what was going to happen. It'll be much harder if you're leaning up against the wall to try to get up and move out. That concrete wall did move. That force will carry through. Granted, there are tire barriers, but there are some spots where there are sometimes no tire barriers. So overall, for anyone getting motorsport photography, it is a great opportunity to get great shots of their drivers out there on the track. But be advised of just the risk and know that from the promoters, the series, the marshals, if they tell you, hey, that spot's not accessible, or hey, we're not going to allow this spot to be open during this series, there's a reason why. I think this was just one of those deals where nobody saw this kind of accident coming. If anything, it almost makes me think about a discussion about damaged vehicle policy for Supercar series, but that's a different topic. But at the end of the day, nobody saw this coming, but then afterwards, that's when it was made, okay, that point's closed off, and then they did a similar action for the other chicanes.
Yeah. So I'm sure this accident is probably going to, cause some changes, not to the future of where photographer access points are at the Gold Coast, but other tracks that the supercars go to as well. And the thing is, Joe, everything, you do in life is a risk, and there's really nothing you can do in this case, there's something you can do to prevent something like this happening, which is cutting off, those certain access points. But, if you're going to have photographers there at the racetrack, there's always the chance, that something could go terribly wrong, and thankfully the instances of that happening are very, very slim, and we have very few incidents of this. But unfortunately, I had one this weekend at the Gold Coast. I'm really happy to hear some positive things about this photographer's condition. I'm glad that no one was hurt in a very severe way. That's certainly the best thing. But the impact was so severe. Saw a glimpse of them getting knocked off their foot in there, and it can be really scary. And it's just the case, of like when you're taking photos of those race cars, you want to get the perfect shot, but it also is another case of needing to keep your head on a swivel and be very aware of your surroundings. But given how fast those cars are coming, it can happen too fast, and it's happening so fast that you may not have enough time to truly react to what is going on. And speaking of photography, I got to tip my hats to anyone who shoots an IndyCar race on an oval, because my goodness, you get some really good shots, but my goodness, if you have a really bad crash in an IndyCar, how those cars can take off and go flying in the air. And especially if it's happening right in front of you, you could see a really, scary thing happen there. If I was a photographer, I'd be really afraid to try to shoot an IndyCar race on an oval track because of the possibility of something going terribly wrong and getting injured in those instances. But I'm sure, but getting back to the supercars, I'm sure I'm sure Supercars is going to learn from this incident and make sure that they can reduce the chances of something like this from happening again, because that was a really scary incident that happened, with Brody Kostecki, who had to miss the very first race, putting him in a must-win situation for race 2. And it was very nice of, Dick Johnson Racing to, provide some footage from their race shop, because thankfully, Dick Johnson Racing is not really far from the Gold Coast, in Surfers Paradise of the street circuit. So they took Brody Kostecki's car back to their team shop, and they posted videos, them repairing it. And also kudos to Brody. He was there working with the team to repair his own car. That's something you don't see a lot these days, especially, drivers who are racing for the so-called big teams of their respective sport. So it's good to see Brody, there in the workshop, with the team repairing his car to get it out for race 2. And in race 2, just like the first race, Chaz Mostert held off Brock Feeney to cut into the points lead and sweep the weekend. Anton De Pasquale, Ryan Wood, and Kostecki were all eliminated from the final. And we have next up, we have Sandown with 7 drivers remaining, and 3 more will be eliminated as Supercars will set their version of the championship 4 at the Adelaide Grand Final. Overall, Joe, what were your initial thoughts on the first race of this finals elimination format and the intense finish we saw race 2 between Mostert and Feeney?
That finish was something else. Again, another thrilling race in the Supercar series, and we kept thinking the weather's coming. Well, it showed up right after the race, but that late safety car, I had a feeling like, okay, this is going to shake up, especially the running order. We had so many drivers in the finals, in the top 10, but we didn't exactly saw that big of a shakeup, but still great race. And overall, I'll say this. I think I sort of like how it's a little bit condensed, where it's each race weekend. As you can see, it's only 3 race weekends. Another group is eliminated. You win, they're going to put yourself in another great spot. But we saw how right away Brock Feeney, with his second place finish in that first race, claimed his spot in the next round. So I think it's so far a pretty good balance. One thing I really like from the coverage, they did a good job not focusing so much on the finals. Yeah, there was talk about what Brody Kostecki going to do, but when it became apparent he wasn't exactly going to be in position to win because he wasn't a must-win by the second race, they talked about some of the other storylines. They focused on some of the other races. So I think overall, I'm pretty impressed with how they've handled their first race weekend under this format. It's going to be something else. Chaz Mostert has to be feeling pretty good. Brock Feeney overall seemed positive. I mean, everybody knows the rules coming in. I'm just curious to see, especially this next race weekend, the Sandown 500, how it's all going to play out in the second race weekend when another group is eliminated.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see how this playoffs format that Supercars have, works. I know it's different compared to the playoffs format that NASCAR has, and we've seen how the NASCAR playoffs have worked over the last few years. But Supercars, looking at what they have going on, it didn't look too bad for the first race weekend. We saw all the drivers who have been most of the drivers have been the best throughout the year end up advancing to the next round at Sandown. And so it wasn't a major shocker, like say a Brock Feeney somehow, falling into the danger zone of being eliminated. But also at the same time, it gives someone like Chaz Mostert, a chance to go out there and win this year's championship, despite the strong year that Brock Feeney is having. So, in years in the past, given how good Brock's been this year, you might at this point of the year, like, man, we're just going to enjoy, the resort. We're going to enjoy the resort-like atmosphere here in Surfers Paradise, and we're just going to have fun on the Gold Coast because the championship, is not possible. But now you really have a shot to go out there and win it. And we certainly saw some finals drama. With Anton De Pasquale getting that penalty there, which ended up crushing him in the end. And then Ryan Wood, he had a mechanical issue in race 1. This is the second straight race for Ryan Wood where they had mechanical issue. Can you remember him and his co-driver Jaden Ojeda had a wonderful Bathurst 1000. They were in position to potentially win the great race. Then a mechanical failure at the end ruined their race. Ryan Wood had another good race going here in the Gold Coast, it's the first race after Bathurst, and then had another mechanical issue. So that's something that Walkinshaw Andretti United has got to figure out moving forward. I mean, I guess they're going to be moving into Toyota next year. They're with Ford now, so I guess it don't really matter now that I think of it. But just for next year, they're going to have to make sure their equipment is reliable and not having these, silly mechanical failures that putting him out on the back foot. And we think Ryan Woody almost didn't even make it into the finals because they had to go behind the wall in Bathurst, repair the car, get him back out there, and he was able to get the positions he needed from others falling out of the race to end up, pointing his way in to this situation. But just to look at the first round of the finals in general, it wasn't too bad. I think we need to continue to see it through to see what it's like. But I think it's going to be really interesting because now we're in the portion of this season, where you can win your way in, because Sandown going to be extremely important, because if you win one of the races at Sandown, you're automatically into the Adelaide Grand Final, as their version of the Championship 4. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes on. And yeah, that finish of race 2 was extremely good. Between Mostert and Feeney, and Feeney, that was some really good driving by him. He wanted to be aggressive, but he also made sure not to get into Mostert, because this is not like NASCAR where you can just bump someone out of the way and get by. In Supercars, if Brock Feeney had give Chaz Mostert the bump and run, or spun him out to win, Feeney would have been penalized and wouldn't have kept that win, and that could have really hurt him, in the point standings heading into the next round at Sandown. So so that's just a different in racing etiquette there. In Supercars, they don't allow that stuff. But if it was like NASCAR, Feeney could just go full send and you just wipe out Mostert and end up getting max points from that race. But it was I always love the Gold Coast. It's one of my favorite tracks on the Supercar schedule, and I was really pleased with the racing we saw this weekend. And I wish someone would create a Supercars video game so I could drive on the Gold Coast myself, because it's such an extraordinary racetrack. And in my opinion, it's one of the top 5 best street circuits we have anywhere in the world. And now looking ahead to the week 30 of the grid ranking, Lando Norris inches closer to Oscar Piastri as Denny Hamlin falls to 9th, and it looks more and more likely that Marc Marquez could clinch 2nd place despite being ruled out for the remainder of the 2025 MotoGP season. And outside of the top 10, Pecco Bagnaia is 28th, while Charles Leclerc has climbed to 31st. And next week we only have Phoenix, so one race next weekend in the grid ranking for pick a winner for the race itself, and then for the title. And now it's time for a grid one shining moment from this racing weekend. So let us know down in the chat below, what's the one thing that stood out to you the most, whether it was from NASCAR at Martinsville, Formula One in Mexico City, or MotoGP in Malaysia, and then obviously Supercars on the Gold Coast. So Joe, what's your one shining moment?
My shining moment is coming from Martinsville, the short track, and it's going to go to Rudy Fugle and William Byron. We've heard all the people talk about the last 2 years in the fall race. That team has seemed to struggle, just barely making a bye. They're in a must-win situation after what happened in Talladega, what happened in Las Vegas. Can they make a bye? They responded big time with the pole. We were talking about, okay, they got the pole. Can they make that effort and put together a solid race? Never had he led over 300 laps in a race. What an effort by him. One thing, as I mentioned, that stood out to me during the race was when we heard Rudy Fugle told William Byron, hey, I know you're chasing down Blaney. Take care of those back tires for me, because when he hits traffic, we're going to need that grip. That just worked out perfectly. It seemed like Rudy Fugle on top of the game, knowing what he's doing. I think they have to be a favorite for next race weekend. I think this is that momentum, that confidence boost that's going to get them to the championship, bring the 24 number another championship, and then we'll be talking about an exciting offseason about can he make it 3 in a row at the Daytona 500, and that is a team effort by the pit crew, flawless pit stops, the driver keeping it cool. He looks so calm in that car, not paying attention to the rearview mirror, and more importantly, the crew chief guiding him to victory. That is my shining moment.
That's a great shining moment, Joe. And I got to give my shining moment to the guy who swept the Supercars race weekend on the Gold Coast, Chaz Mostert. Mostert in his number 20 and number 25 Waukesha Andretti United team there, peaking at the right time. And what a way to start off the postseason, by making a major statement by winning the very first 2 races. It's been the season of Brock Feeney, but with this format, it brings everybody back into play. And Chaz Mostert, he could be a force to be reckoned with, because if he can keep this hot streak going, heading into Sandown and obviously the Adelaide Grand Final, Chaz Mostert might potentially be a threat to steal this championship from Brock Feeney. I thought he performed flawlessly all race weekend and did exactly what he needed to do to capitalize on this new format to make sure that he's giving his team the best chance to win this year's title. But my biggest concern about Walkinshaw Andretti United is their inconsistency to give Chaz, the equipment that he needs to go out there and perform week in and week out. On a week like this, you give him the right type of car, right setup, and good equipment. He can go out there and do what he did, go sweep the weekend. But then the next week he'll be like mid-pack or something like that. So I think if they can, just be consistent these final few race weekends of the year, that they can potentially do something special. And it was really nice to see, someone else get up there and take command of the championships. And who knows what's going to happen as we get later on in the Supercar season. Maybe Chaz Mostert plays spoiler because it's been a year of Brock Feeney at number 8018.
Yeah, he could be the spoiler. Supercar Series, Sandown 500, a couple weeks away. Next weekend, we only have one race. Of course, this weekend, Ben and Brandon, they'll be on the air Grid Encore tomorrow, recapping the Craftsman Truck Series and the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Martinsville, and then they'll be on next race weekend as well to recap the championship races. Don't forget Wednesday, Grid Tonight, Kobe, Josh, Matt will be on the air to recap all the major motorsports news from across the motorsport world. And then, of course, our big pre-race show next race weekend. We only got the NASCAR championship race, so we'll be on the air before and after the race. And be sure to follow us across social media at Grid Network TV. And once again, a big thank you to our Patreon investors, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, and Crystal. For Kobe and for Matthew Bro, who was here earlier today, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.